Snuff films, Centipede parties, and cannibalism made real. If America enjoyed these, what made the rest of the world turn a blind eye? One of the most high-profile banned films of all time, The Exorcist tells the frightening story of young Regan MacNeil, a 12-year-old possessed by the spirit of a demon. The plot chronicles the effort to rid her of that evil entity by an exorcist and his colleague. From the moment of The Exorcist's theatrical release, it faced severe pushback in the United Kingdom. Members of the clergy protested it, and after a successful VHS release in 1981, it became effectively banned in 1984 when the British Board of Film Classification refused to give it a certificate under the Video Recordings Act. It remained unavailable to buy in the UK until 1999. Of course, The Exorcist didn't face these same restrictions in the US, although many critics believed it should have been X-rated. It was instead rated R, much to the studio's delight. And so, despite the British ban, The Exorcist went on to become a huge success, becoming the highest-grossing R-rated horror movie of all time, until it took the top spot away in 2017. One of the most controversial horror movies of all time, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a revolutionary step up for cinematic violence. Released in 1974, it was one of the first films to establish core elements of the slasher genre, and it was also banned in several countries. In fact, it pretty much became synonymous with the entire idea of banned movies. And for good reason, as it was banned in the UK from its initial release in 1974 until 1999. The UK ban happened on the advice of the British Board of Film Classification, and even copycats couldn't use the word chainsaw in subsequent movies. But by 1999, the BBFC reclassified the film, allowing it to be released with an 18 certificate. But it wasn't just the Brits who had a problem with this film. It was initially refused a rating in Australia, and remained banned until it was eventually given an R rating in 1984. It was also banned at various points across Brazil, Chile, Finland, France, Iceland, Ireland, Norway, Singapore, Sweden, and West Germany. As for the US, although some audience members walked out of the film in disgust, Texas Chainsaw enjoyed a successful, wide release stateside.
You got any self-respect?
A brutal rape revenge horror movie. 1978's I Spit on Your Grave was always going to come under scrutiny from the censors, as the plot follows a short story writer's sexual assault and the revenge she enacts upon her tormentor. I Spit on Your Grave was met with almost entirely negative reviews, with Roger Ebert for one calling it a vile bag of garbage, without a shred of artistic distinction. Worse yet, the film was also banned across the globe. Ireland, Norway, Iceland, and West Germany all banned it outright, and Canada initially banned it entirely as well, though individual provinces were later allowed to make their own decisions in the 90s. The United Kingdom refused to give I Spit on Your Grave a certificate, thereby forcing it straight to home video, since that was unregulated at the time. It was added to a list of prosecutable films and remained banned until 2001. Even in the US, I Spit on Your Grave was mired in controversy. Although it was initially given an R rating, producers attempted to add in further graphic scenes of rape and violence once the rating had been secured. The MPAA then took the film's producers to court, claiming that the additional scenes would bump it up to an X rating. I Spit on Your Grave was eventually released without a distributor in a handful of theaters across the country, before an eventual re-release in 1980. It may not have ignited the box office, but it's since become one of the most well-known banned movies of all time.
I'm glad. It's you I wanted.
There are some films that live in profound infamy, and Faces of Death is one of them. Released in 1978, this Mondo horror flick has been the subject of legend. It follows pathologist Francis B. Gross as he explores the many different and gruesome ways that people can die. It's a simple concept that went a bit too far, with staged or fake deaths cut between footage of very real, actual death scenes. The film's makeup artists estimated that around 60% of the film used real footage of actual death scenes, with clips of extreme fatal accidents and surgical mishaps accounting for some of that. Even more controversial, graphic scenes from the crash of Pacific Southwest Airlines Flight 182 were added in. This infamous accident occurred just weeks before the film's release, making these segments both horrific to watch and incredibly insensitive. Although Faces of Death was often said to be banned in more than 40 countries, that's not exactly true. However, it was banned outright in New Zealand, in Australia until 2007, and in the UK until a revised cut was approved for DVD in 2003. Nevertheless, the film was a hit at the American box office. It earned a whopping $35 million on a budget of just $450,000. One of the first found footage horror films, 1980's Cannibal Holocaust, is as notorious as it is legendary, including depictions of cannibalism and very real on-screen animal deaths. It was presented as a legitimate documentary. It charts the gruesome voyage of anthropologist Harold Monroe as he leads a rescue mission into the Amazon rainforest to look for a crew of filmmakers. It all appeared so realistic that director Ruggero Deodato was actually arrested for murder upon the film's release. The controversy began when a French magazine suggested that Cannibal Holocaust was actually a snuff film, with several death scenes presumed to be too realistic to be faked. Italian magistrates, who had already served Deodato with obscenity charges, then amended them to include murder. Questions were asked about the lack of press done by the supposedly deceased actors. As it turned out, they signed a contract not to make any media appearances for 1 year after the film's release, all in an effort to make this fake documentary seem more real.
This so-called documentary footage is offensive, it is dishonest, and above all, it is inhuman.
Ultimately, an appearance from the supposedly dead actors convinced the courts that Deodato was not actually a murderer. Nevertheless, Cannibal Holocaust had already earned its place among the most notorious horror flicks of all time. It was banned outright in Australia, Norway, Finland, Iceland, New Zealand, and Singapore. And while the UK released it straight to VHS, it was eventually banned as part of the government's video nasties list. As for the US, it was originally banned there as well, though it was eventually released unrated in 1985 and then made its way to DVD and Blu-ray. It may seem tame by today's standards, but The Evil Dead was indeed banned. This quintessential cabin-in-the-woods story is filled to the brim with over-the-top acting and silly special effects. While genuinely scary, it's also quite cheesy, though it was too much for some viewers. The plot follows Ash Williams and his pals as their trip to a lone cabin in the woods swiftly goes sideways when they inadvertently summon a demon. Everything about the film is campy in the best way possible, but its effects earned it a place among the most notorious splatter films of its era. In the United Kingdom, it was given an X rating, but was released unrated on VHS. However, the Video Recordings Act in 1984 resulted in VHS copies being removed from circulation. In 1990, an edited version was granted an 18 rating, and it wasn't until 2000 that the uncut version was rated 18, effectively unbanning it, though it remains banned to this day in several other countries. But in the US, The Evil Dead had a much easier time. Originally given an X rating, it had a full theatrical release and was eventually reclassified as NC-17 for substantial graphic horror violence and gore.
Groovy.
It's safe to say that the human centipede has enjoyed plenty of notoriety. The concept is thoroughly disgusting, to say the least, as a mad scientist joins 3 human victims together end to end, thereby creating the human centipede in the title. At least the use of bandages allowed much of the grotesque body horror to remain implied. But in the Human Centipede 2 full sequence, director Tom Six cranks up the gross-out thrills to 11 with homemade surgical tools, a 10-person centipede, and disturbing images that leave very little to the imagination. The Human Centipede 2 was so gross that it was initially refused classification in the UK, even with the BBFC's more modern, relaxed rulings. Considered too obscene to be released, it was thought that there was no way to edit it to make it suitable for release. Ultimately, though, the BBFC changed its mind, After 32 cuts that removed 2 minutes and 37 seconds of footage, the movie was granted an 18 rating. It's still banned in New Zealand, though. In the US, The Human Centipede 2 found its audience when it debuted at the 2011 Fantastic Fest, where viewers were handed complimentary barf bags with an ambulance stationed outside the screening as a gimmick. Remaining unrated, the film was given a limited release with midnight showings at just 24 theaters. It may have only grossed $140,000 at the box office, but it ultimately found its audience on DVD and Blu-ray. It's no secret that 2005's Hostel pretty much defined the torture porn subgenre, a combination of splatter and slasher flicks that rose to prominence in the 2000s. But 2007's Hostel Part II is considered even more obscene than the original, and for good reason. The plot follows 3 female art students who become caught up with the elite hunting club, pursued as potential victims for the organization's wealthy members. And this time around, we're treated to scenes depicting scalping, genital mutilation, and cannibalism.
Please don't hurt me! Please don't hurt me! I'm sorry!
The first Hostel was banned in Ukraine, while Slovakian officials renounced it without banning it. The sequel, meanwhile, was banned outright in New Zealand, and it was even brought up in the House of Commons in the UK, as members of Parliament discussed a proposed law to criminalize possession of extreme pornography. In Germany, the film was cut to secure a theatrical release, but the later extended cut was banned outright. In fact, a Munich court found the release of the extended cut to be punishable by law. Unsurprisingly, the MPAA gave Hostel Part II an R rating in America. Despite plenty of media coverage and controversy, though, it grossed just $35 million, far less than its predecessor. One of the nastiest, most horrific movies ever made, 2010's A Serbian Film absolutely deserves its notoriety. The story of a former adult film star who was manipulated into starring in an increasingly sadistic art movie. A Serbian Film is certainly not for the faint of heart. It contains depictions of necrophilia and pedophilia, among other horrific moments. Some specific scenes include the rape and murder of a newborn infant, sex with cadavers, and a finale that sees the drugged protagonist have sex with his own child. It's just about the sickest film you can possibly imagine. And even the subtext about the Serbian government's control of its people isn't enough to give this movie even a glimmer of redemption. Unsurprisingly, the censors had a field day with this one. A Serbian Film has been banned in Germany, Norway, Brazil, Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, Spain, and Singapore. Even countries that allowed it to have a theatrical release required extensive cuts and amendments to make it remotely suitable. Surprisingly enough, the UK was among the countries that allowed the release, following censorship and cuts. The United States also provided a theatrical home for a Serbian film, and with some cuts, it managed to land an NC-17 rating. The uncut version, however, remains unrated. It may have been released fairly easily in the US, but honestly, do you actually want to see it?